Go live, unaware and looking at his phone or doing something else. How are you?
Fantastic. How are you?
I am very good. And hello to. See, Jody says Steve is really pulling off his Nixon look in that thumbnail. We were just saying that we probably need to. Here we go. Someone screen grab that. Someone's. That's the next one for next week's thumbnail. Hello, Don. Don, it is 9 a.m. here in Aussie land. It's 4 p.m. over where you are, and apparently for most people that is a perfect time to stream. So we've decided to keep with that time. Hello, Andy. Andy is always here. I think Andy's here. That was yesterday he posted that. And other Richard is doing some veggie garden sprinklers. So
I read that as vegan garden sprinkler. I'm like, how do you make a vegan garden sprinkler?
Well, see, I read it as 30. It's only 30 degrees today. Well, 30 degrees is quite warm to me, but it's quite cold to you. So
it's cold to me. Yeah, it's 63 here, and I'm almost in need of a jacket.
Well, when I say I'm talking Celsius to Fahrenheit, so we've had some pretty warm days. And Norm is in. Hello, Norm, as well. Good to see you there. Now you're on the road, and you're on the way to Quartz Fest, right?
I am.
Which is in Quartz. What was it? Quartz Site. Quartz Site?
Quartz Site. Quartz Site.
It's an unusual name for a town or a area, isn't it? Quartz Site.
So it's actually extremely specific, which is actually pretty odd for a town name. It's a site where they found lots of quartz.
That makes sense.
So it's Quartz Site, and then the festival for hams that is at Quartz Site is called Quartz Fest.
And what do you do at Quartz Fest?
Well, there's a ton of stuff to do. It's a week-long ham fest, and it's a lot of different classes. First off, it's all off-grid, camping out in the desert in the middle of nowhere on public lands. And then second, there's all the classes that go on. And third, there's a whole bunch of hams that are there. But I'm really just going to hang out with my friends, and I don't even know what the class roster is because their website was built in 1982.
So it's not like a traditional ham fest then. It's more
there
like
are zero vendors. There are zero big name vendors. There are zero name vendors.
It's like one big camp out, right? Is it a POTA entity or anything like that, or is it a?
There is a soda nearby, and there is a POTA nearby.
Okay. Well, but you're going to be doing lots of radio. I know that Chuck had his Chucky Hex there last year because I worked him on 10 meters.
You did.
Chucky Hex to Buddy Hex. That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I don't even know that I'll set up a station. I think we'll just work Chuck's station the whole time.
Is Chuck bringing something along? Do you know what he's bringing along? An antenna?
I don't know what he's bringing along, but there is a distance communication contest. There's a DX contest. I can use real ham words here. There's a DX contest that's happening while we're there. So he might be bringing his Moxon and working 2 meters. He might be bringing his hex beam and working on that. It just depends on what he feels like that day. I mean, if I was going for distance, I don't know. What do you think? If you didn't have the ability to set up a beam in a tower, since today's show is all about antennas, would you run a vertical? Would you run a phased vertical? I mean, you have to pack it in and pack it out and set it up, and there's no way to like pound stakes into the desert or anything.
And why would you choose those antennas too? That's a very good segue because that is what we're talking about, antennas today. And when you arrived at your location where you are now, bring up the photos that you discovered. I just love this. See, we don't really have this as much. It just seems to be that you drive around randomly and you find an RV park somewhere to stay the night, and you find in that RV park some interesting finds, don't you?
Yep, I'm pulling the picture up now. Let's do the present share and that. So there is the tower that I found, and it's got 4 elements on it and a vertical.
So this is just randomly in an RV park that you just pulled into, right?
Yep. Let me get you a closer view.
So that looks like four. That looks like 4 elements. Three elements. 4 elements.
I think it's a combination of antennas on the beam.
It's a bit hard to tell in that photo. We probably need to zoom
there
up.
There you go.
Ah, there we go.
So,
yes.
So there's a zoom.
So So it
And
looks
so the
like
reason why I'm saying it's two different antennas on the same beam is because one of the elements is significantly smaller than the rest.
and a little bit not really symmetrical, is it? Do you reckon it's
No.
lost? Has it lost an element?
It
Is that
probably
is that a
has,
problem?
yeah. Yeah, it
Because I'm
probably
just looking
has.
at that. They look like traps on the end of those other elements, but that
It
third
does,
one
yep.
doesn't look like it's got any. It's very short on that side, and it's not symmetrical
Whoa,
with the other side.
stop that. So let me. Yeah, it's definitely not symmetrical, and it looks like it's missing a link here that is here. So yeah, I would agree with that. And then here is the trap that Hayden's talking about. And then something I saw in this photo that I didn't see in person is there is a dipole up there also. There's a dipole
Ah,
center right
yes,
there.
can
You can
see
see the
that.
wire going off that way and going off that way, and the rest of them are all guy lines for the tower.
And there's a vertical out the top too for just two. It looks like a diamond or something
Yep.
for 2 meters and 70 centimeters.
Chicom Phaser 3000.
Well, that's going to be the next thing, isn't it? It's going to be trailer parks on the air or something like that. We're going to have.
Well, trailer park in the U.S. is something completely different than an RV park. Just to be pedantic.
Oh, okay. Well, I didn't know that. No, hang on. So now not only did you find that tower though, you also found something else. You found there was.
Yep. Let me get you one more photo of the tower. I got an even
Yeah?
closer shot. There you go. So now you can see the dipole
Ooh.
center that's up there, and you can see a couple of ugly balloons up there.
Yeah, big couple of chokes.
And I know there's a rotor up there because I saw the rotor controller.
So it looks like that sits on that top plate, I reckon, and it's got a very short length of mast to control that tower on top,
Yeah.
to control that antenna on top. You just can't see it in that photo.
Yeah, well, I'm not 40 foot tall, so
No.
I've got that.
You're
problem
tall,
for
but
me.
you're not that tall.
All right, and now the picture that Hayden wants to see. Yeah, this was completely unexpected. The Butterfield RV Resort Radio Room KE7CJQ.
Let's bring that up on the Z if they're on there.
Are you bringing it up?
Yep.
Okay, cool.
KE7CK CQJ, and they had underneath so we were looking on Google Street View at this location, and we could see that they ran the cable under the road,
Yeah, under the asphalt.
Yeah. Here we go. So QRZ says, this is the Butterfield Amateur Radio Club. CE7CQJ is the club call for the Butterfield Amateur Radio Club. Equipment includes an ICOM 718, a TM733 duo bander. Antennas are a 40-meter dipole, a Cushcraft A4S tri-band beam, and two 70-23-centimeter vertical antenna. Visitors to the Benson area are welcome to use the facilities or their own rigs. The ham shack
Nice.
is located with a 16-inch Meade LX200 reflector telescope in a protected dome observatory.
Yep.
It's a very small photo. There it is. So that's that. Let's have a look at that Cushcraft antenna. I want to know if that's 3 or 4 elements. Oh no! Look, it does have a shorter element in there.
All right, so what all is it good for?
That is a very good question. So it's 20, 15, and 10 tri-band. Boom assembly. Wow, that's there's a lot of numbers on that assembly diagram. D2. What does D2 do? It's probably is it some sort of matching element or something?
Yeah, it's definitely supposed to be symmetrical.
Yeah, it doesn't look symmetrical in your photo, did it?
No. And my assumption with that is that it's not a Yagi. It just happens to have 3 elements on a beam.
Does anyone know? Here we go. Reflector 1, reflector 2. Oh. Is that... So this might be the reflector, or one of them, I'm assuming this one, might be the reflector for the 20-meter band. maybe the 20 and 15, because see how there's traps on this? And then there's 2 traps on these other elements. So what they've done is they've got, so if this is the 20 meter reflector in its full length, 15 meter reflector between the 2 traps, and then they've just added another 10 meter reflector in here. That's what I think that is, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
I learned something new. I didn't know you could do traps on reflectors. I mean, I don't see why you couldn't. I just, I would immediately think that you couldn't, and then be surprised when you could. And here I am surprised.
Arrows on the trap points to the center of the element, and is it? I might be completely off, obviously, but I just saw here number 1 reflector, number 2 reflector, number 3 driven element, number 4 director, and obviously being the shorter element, I would imagine that that's 10 meters. That's the 10 meter reflector, and these other elements have 2 traps on them, so they've got they're
so
sort of
scroll down to that chart one again.
Driven element. Yeah. Looking at all the length.
Yeah, but it looks like they don't change. Number 1 reflector is always B1, C1, D1.
What does everyone in the chat say? Well, it might be completely wrong, but Trevor says it's a 10 meter reflector as well.
Yeah. So,
Yeah,
I mean, one of the things we should do for some of the newer hams that are out there is talk about what traps are, since we're talking about antennas.
Yes. So, so we kind of got a little bit sidetracked, but that's what happens here on Ham Radio Nonsense. We get very much sidetracked.
We got sidetracked about talking about antennas by talking about antennas. So we're actually we're doing good.
Yeah. We're supposedly talking about the difference with, you could spend a whole heap of money on a radio. So say you bought a radio for like $2,000 or $3,000. You got the top of the line radio, but what's the difference? What happens if you spent $2,000 or $3,000 on an antenna? What's the difference? What's the trade-off? Do you want the latest and greatest radio, or do you want just a standard radio that will get you on the air and spend a lot of money on an antenna? Let us know in the chat. Let me put a poll in, which we do every week, and we'll say radio or antenna. Which one should you concentrate on the most? So that's in there now. So traps on an antenna. They effectively, this is the way that I'm going to explain it. They trap the signal at a certain frequency, so the element looks a certain length for that particular band. So you can see here that on this diagram, they've got B1 written here, B1 to B1. That is one frequency, which would be, what I'm guessing, 15 meters there. And the trap stops any frequency, it stops the 15 meter frequency here. So it effectively means that element is loaded up on 15 meters. And then this trap will allow lower frequencies to pass through. So it will allow 20 meters to pass through, and it sees the entire length of the element. I probably explained that in a completely terrible way, so T.O. is going to explain it the right way.
Sure. So you guys have seen linked dipoles where you have a wire that is cut for a 10-meter dipole, and then you can physically connect it to another piece of wire that makes it longer to make it a 20-meter dipole. What a trap does is it is a capacitor and an inductor that stops the signal from going beyond the 10-meter section into the 20-meter section to make your antenna resonant on 10 meters. And then because of the magic of RF and the magic of electricity and so forth, when you switch frequencies to 20 meters, 14 megahertz, the signal will actually pass through the trap as if it doesn't even exist. So now you have one piece of wire that's fully connected at all times with this trap in the middle that's on the screen here, something along these lines. And you don't have to unlink and relink it, and it's actually resonant on 2 different bands.
So you see these in dipoles as well, trapped dipoles. Mm-hmm. One length of wire with the trap along the wire at certain intervals for whatever frequency that you want as well. Traps can also Traps are different though than loading coils. Loading coils
they are.
effectively make an antenna shorter, whereas traps don't make an antenna longer or shorter. They just stop the stop at a certain point along the antenna to make it appear like it's shorter to the radio.
Right. And you can actually get a trap kit and build your own from QRP guys for QRP style levels of power. And Liberty's correct. Hayden misspoke. But that's okay. We do that every so often.
Oh, did I misspeak? Yes.
Yeah, coils
Happy to
make
be
antennas
corrected.
electrically longer.
Yes.
It's just more wire in a shorter amount of space.
I'm trying to bring up that QRP guys
Roy, it
trap stuff,
is
but
definitely magic.
it is. It is magic. What is that's a good question. What is the blue thing in the pipe? That'd be a capacitor, wouldn't it?
Yes. Capacitor inside the pipe, and then the coil of copper around the outside is the inductor.
So I've
And
seen.
these are all, you can look up a chart and it will tell you which inductance and capacitance to use to create the trap for the frequency that you want to trap.
I've seen traps made with with coils made like that, and then the capacitor being like something as simple as a piece of PCB material in the middle, a copper ground. What do you call them? The copper ground PCB with copper on both sides. Can't remember what they are. Etching board. You know what I mean. And they slot in there and they form a capacitor. And winding those coils has become easy with 3D printing now, hasn't it?
Oh,
that one on the
yeah.
right looks like it's been 3D printed. Well, has it been 3D printed? Kind of looks like it a little bit.
Judging from the age of the photograph, I'd say that's all cut PVC.
So Bryant says, is that a big capacitor or a small pipe?
It's a big capacitor in a big pipe with 4 small pipes around the outside. That's actually probably, something you'd hold in your hand like this size.
Yeah, well, Jody was saying that's a large cap for the job. It's probably rated for quite a bit of power.
Well, let me see if I can find...
So while you're waiting for that, Refresh says, off topic, what is your favourite bands? And you said 20 metres, T.O.
Mm-hmm.
My favourite band is 6 metres, but my favourite HF band is 10 metres. And 20 metres has been... I switched on to 20 metres last night and the band scope was completely full. There was just stations everywhere in Europe. It was just amazing.
There you go. There's a better diagram. So this is a dipole. It's half of a dipole. As you're looking at it, it's the left side of the dipole. So you see the center insulator and then 95 inches of wire for 10 meters and then a trap and then 13 inches of wire to the 15 meter trap and then 30 inches of wire to the 20 meter trap and 30 and 40 and so on. And then 140 inches out to the end insulator. So this antenna would be good for 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, and it looks like 80 without ever needing a tuner or without ever like bringing down the antenna and connecting links or anything else.
And you can bend that wire around the corner as well. It's saying that the 80 meter element's bent to fit in the available space. So there's a little bit of give that you can do. You can sort of fit it in the space that you need. You could do something the same with a fan dipole. So you could run out wires for each of those bands. You might run into some harmonic issues potentially with some of the higher bands if you're using 80 and 40 meters. But the trap just keeps it all within just using one piece of wire.
So Paul is asking, is a trap like a low-pass filter? And I'm not sure I'm going to get the direction right, whether it's low-pass or high-pass, but yes. It stops the frequency from going at one
It
band
stops a certain
and then
frequency.
allows it through at another.
So I think...
band stop filter.
So,
but they're all similarly constructed.
Yeah, so a trap is a tuned LC circuit to a specific frequency, and that frequency is stopped at that particular portion of the antenna. Everything else can go through, but that particular frequency can't. So it's band
so, if
stop.
you really want to be pedantic, it's actually both a band stop and a high pass. It's allowing the frequency to stop at 10 meters, and it's allowing it to pass at 15 meters.
And also the the when you say band, especially if it's something like an 80 or a 40 meter trap, it's going to be determined by the Q factor of the trap that you've built. So it might, when you say band, it's not going to be the entire band of 80 meters. It might only be like 20 or 30 kilohertz, at the most. Maybe it could even be less. So when you build traps, they should give the bandwidth that you should expect out of them. Going back to the tri-band
out there to find all that stuff.
Yes. Going back to the chat, Norm says that he has a 4-element tri-band Yagi sitting on the driveway. The rotator is too small for it, though. Antennas don't work too well on the ground. They need to be up high in the air.
For transmitting.
Our has voted antenna, but the radio is so shiny. And at the moment, we're sitting on 85% have said antenna, 84% have said antenna now, 16% radio. So everyone is on the antenna train. So would you be buying a $2,000 radio TO, or if you had unlimited space, you already had a radio. So say you had a really basic, let's use a real life example. So say you had a Zygu G90, right? A 20 watt Zygu G90. You paired it with what's one of those XFA amplifiers, the 100 watt amplifier. So you had 100 watts.
XPA 125B, yep.
Yep. You had 100 watts, an HF radio, and you had the choice of purchasing a brand new FT DX10. So what's that, like $1,500, $2,000 or whatever it is? Would you go? Yes. And you've been running your Zygu on, say, a little dipole in the backyard. You've strung it up. You've got no neighbours around, so it doesn't matter what antenna you put up. Would you be going and putting your money into that radio for the extra features of the FT DX10? Or would you be going and using that money to invest in something like a tower and a large Yagi, like we just saw in the photo that you took earlier on today? What would be your reasoning, and which one would you choose and why?
So for me, it's all mission oriented, which is what you just finished up with. Is what is your reasoning? My goal in ham radio is to play around with all the electronics and the computers, and experiment with all the different antennas and those kinds of things. So when I got tired of dealing with wires in trees and dipoles strung between trees and antennas on tripods and vertical antennas and things like that, and then I might start looking into setting up towers and so forth. But there's a lot of antennas to play with before you get there. So the reason why I bring up the mission, though, is because if your mission is to sit in Wisconsin and to break through DX Commander Callum's pileups on his Friday morning live streams, you're going to want a completely different setup. He runs 40 meters most of the time, and you're going to want some elevation to that, and you're going to want to point it, and you're going to want some gain in his direction. So you're talking about, a beam on a tower for something along those lines. I never was able to even hear him at 40 meters with a vertical antenna in Wisconsin.
So if you want if your goal is to literally is to work DX, and you really want to do that consistently, and like you said, if you were trying to work Callum, if you had a specific goal in mind like that, then a big Yagi antenna, if you had the ability to put that up, would be the way to go. But on the other hand, if you're not so worried about that and you just want to, get on the air, then there's nothing wrong with something like an NFED, like Other Richard says, or any other antenna. I think Don said there that he's got his hex beam, which is up not very high at 8 foot, but it works well, and the DX Commander also works well. So I think that it's kind of a funny thing, isn't it, though? It's one of those things where it's like a better radio is not necessarily going to improve things, though.
Right. I mean, a QRP radio with a fantastic beam antenna is going to be loud in your ears because the antenna is going to have its own built-in gain.
And
yeah,
Greg
is right. I want to stir a curtain.
And your signal is going to be going in the direction that you want it to as well. So not only that, if you want to steer your antenna, then you've also got to think of a rotator too, which these things cost. They keep adding up into the costs. Ours runs a barefoot G90 into a DX Commander Classic, is working nice, but he still wants an FT 710. It is one of those things, isn't it? Jody, GPU versus CPU, engine versus tires, radio versus antenna. In short, more money, more options. Exactly. Hello, Daz.
So that's the Sturba curtain that Greg's talking about. That'll give you tons of gain in one specific direction only, because that's not easily rotatable.
So we had an old AM broadcast tower antenna, which the radio station converted from AM to FM quite a number of years ago. So the broadcast tower was left unused, and the frequency was pretty close to 160 meters. So you could put a tuner on the antenna, if you got the right adapters and everything, because AM broadcast cable is like this with big connectors. But one guy I know, he did that. He went and plugged in an ATU, tuned it all up, got it going, and he was a massive signal on 160 meters, because there was, you can't get an antenna usually that big. Sure, if you've got the land and you've got the time and you've got the money, but it was a very, very big signal. Liberty Cave, if DX is the goal, antenna. I'm on the antenna train. I like antennas.
Right. And we talk about preppers a lot in this hobby, and that's one of the things you have to talk about is regional communications. And so regional communications, a big multi-element beam on top of a tower with a rotator is not going to get you, 300 miles down the street. You're just going to shoot right over top of that.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing with the preppers buying a radio, buying a ham radio, or getting a ham radio license. And it's always tech license and a Baofeng radio. And it's like, well, that's good in your prepper situation to talk across the street or down the road or across town. But what about if you want to get a little bit further than that? And I think HF is always that second banana and forgotten about.
Definitely.
So Chris says he likes the idea of these traps. I love these little side quests that we take, T.O., and it's just everyone's going to go out and build trap antennas.
This is the Ham Radio Nonsense Show. What would we be without side trips?
We just talk about all sorts of things. It doesn't matter what the title and thumbnail says. It could be completely off topic and off track. We need to come up with a trap antenna now. The trap tenor. That sounds like the crap tenor. The trap tenor. VK2LQ, also VK2PCT. I've been using a Zygo X6100. Steve loves his X6100. 5 watts on a 7-band cobweb. 6 meters into the air, the USA Canary Islands. Awesome. 5 watts. That's the other thing too, is that with the solar cycle apparently peaking between this month and October this year, at some point, you can work the world on a piece of wire. Trevor, the more antenna you put in the air, the better. Now, talk about NVIS. NVIS is something which you might want to do rather than getting antennas to work DX. You might just only work local or want to work local.
Yes, so we talked about end-fed half waves earlier, and I ran my end-fed half wave at 3 feet off the ground and worked half the U.S. So, NVIS is it's a way of setting your antenna up low to the ground, which causes your signals to go more straight up. So whenever you talk about an antenna, it always goes off in 2 directions. And so if you take your antenna pattern in this way, it also goes off in 2 directions. But this one here is closer to the ground, so it goes down and bounces right back up. And this one here goes up. And so when you hit the ionosphere, you come back down at a very tight angle, a very acute angle, instead of going off and then hitting the horizon and then going back down in the other direction with a proper height dipole or something along those lines. So NVIS, near vertical incidence skywave propagation. I just love the way that sounds. Is really for getting you local communications, and it's also just for being a lazy ham. I mean, there's absolutely nothing wrong with going out to a park, running a wire 3 feet off the ground, and making 50 or 60 contacts in half an hour.
So we've got a couple of questions coming in here. So the first one is Jim Jam. Who did your hair, man? I don't. I do my own hair. I don't know about Tio. He doesn't have any hair, so
Nope.
the great
Do
reveal.
my own hair.
See, for weeks and weeks and weeks, we've been streaming and talking and all this other thing. And then, like last week, you were like, "Lift your hand." I went, "When did you get rid of your hair?" And you're like, "Months ago." I said, "Well, I never
Months
noticed
ago.
because you're wearing the same hat all the time."
I'm incognito.
Yeah, that's right. Michael says that shiny new rig depreciates whenever the new model comes out. A great antenna lasts many radio generations.
That's true. And that depreciation, by the way, is completely inside of your own head. You can take that old radio and sell it for almost as much as you paid for it 10 or 15 years later. Radios really hold their value well.
Yeah, like radio depreciation. Is that it? Like, is that even a thing? I don't think that is even a real thing because, as you say, I've seen some radios that they're ridiculously overpriced on the second-hand market for what they probably should be.
It's all supply and demand.
Joe has a question. Which is better for local comms on 10 meters, a vertical or a dipole? So, you could have a dipole which is vertical as well. I think that you mean a quarter wave, like a ground plane vertical or a DX Commander type of vertical, like ground mounted vertical, or a dipole antenna. So there's a couple of answers to this. The first one is if you're talking about a vertical antenna and then a dipole being horizontally strung up, then you're in two different polarizations. You're in vertical and you're in horizontal. It all depends too for local comms on what everyone else is using as well. Because that's where antenna polarization actually does make a bit of a difference. So, for instance, if you want to talk to your local repeater or you want to talk simplex to the guy down the street who also uses vertical, then you'd be better off using a vertical as well. Because if you used a horizontal dipole, then you're going to have a cross polarization and the signal's not going to be as strong. If you don't care about that, I think that a vertical is probably, if you've got a single structure to actually mount it on and to put it up with, a vertical is probably a little bit easier than a dipole because a dipole is going to take more room horizontally. It's going to require 3 supports. You've got your support in the middle and then you've got to support the ends if you've got like an inverted V. So that could be a tree. You might already have a couple of trees. So I kind of guess it depends on what you can. It's that same old answer, isn't it, Tio? It depends.
It always depends. That is always the answer in ham radio.
When
you're talking about verticals and dipoles, did you mention takeoff angle?
No, I didn't mention takeoff angle at all. No.
Okay.
So local comms, you're thinking to NVIS. I think we're talking either ground wave or NVIS. So,
well, he also specified 10 meters. Aren't most 10-meter repeaters vertical?
Yes. So that's the other. That's the other thing is if you're trying to just work a repeater, then most of them are vertical. So repeaters are mainly vertical for mobile, or mobile and handhelds, because you hold your handheld in your hand talking like this. Your antenna's vertical. Same too on a car. It's a bit difficult to get a horizontal antenna on a car. You might sideswipe a pedestrian while you're driving past them.
Front to back.
Yeah. So yeah, drive around with a 10-meter dipole on your roof, horizontal dipole. I've done a video on my channel on building a vertical, 10-meter vertical, very easy out of a piece of coax. But I think you're going to get good results with either, depending on whatever situation you need, or what your situation is, rather. You got any thoughts on that at all, Tio, or none?
I have no thoughts on that. I was actually looking for something else to bring up next.
Well, Adam says, how local are we talking and what terrain is it like? What frequencies? So this comes back to it depends. For groundway, the vertical will likely be better for NVIS or dipole. Verticals tend to be a little bit noisier as well, I think is the... and again, it depends. It may not necessarily be... Yeah, here we go. VK3, okay, vertical will be noisier than a dipole. But it also depends on where you are as well. It might not.
Yeah. So they say that because most of the noise comes in at that polarization. Most of your local noise
Man-made
is vertically
noise.
polarized.
Yeah.
But, with more noise comes more signal also sometimes too.
Just going through on that topic if there's any other comments. 10-meter mobile rig will be vertical.
Mm-hmm.
Ryan says a 10-meter Moxon on the roof. 10-meter Moxon's not really a big antenna, and it's a very good antenna. It's a 2-element beam, so they work very well. Norm's made a 10-meter flower pot antenna for portable work. So yeah, and Joe Brett, hello Joe Brett, says my horizontal loop has more noise and more signal than my vertical.
Right, Jody.
So hopefully that doesn't answer the question, because I highly doubt it does answer the question, but at least it might steer you sort of in the right direction. The other answer is build both of them and just compare the two. Put them on an antenna switch and see which one works better.
Right.
Paul Howson, can amateur technician license only use radio through a repeater?
Nope. In the U.S., you can use it anywhere you want and on more bands than you think. What is it, 10 meters and up? So you have HF privileges, you have VHF, you have UHF, you have microwave. All kinds of stuff you can do with a technician license in the U.S.
It blows my mind that you can get the entry-level license in the US technician. You can operate on 10 meters and above, so you can operate in the microwave bands, 2 meters, 70 centimeters, 6 meters, and you can run up to 1.5 kilowatts as a technician, an entry-level license. Whereas here, and on the bands where higher power and more gain is more dangerous to someone than lower frequencies and lower gain with higher power. But here in this country, we try to get a kilowatt for the highest level of license, and we are not allowed a kilowatt for the highest level of license. We say, can we just at least have a kilowatt on just HF then? No, you can't. You need to go through all these special hoops and dive through all these things. And foundation level, entry level is only allowed 10 watts. It's just absolutely crazy. I don't understand why, but anyway.
Well, it's funny because you can literally cook somebody as a U.S. technician.
Yes.
But in order to get the most advanced level license, your ability to literally do some damage goes down as you go up in license class.
Yeah, it does. You get more HF bands, but that's fine. That's not going to hurt anyone. You can hurt someone straight off the bat or you hurt yourself straight off the bat if you really wanted to. But they're starting to are they starting to become a little bit more concerned about that now, because you've got like the ARRL have the power density calculator thingamajiggy so that you can calculate how much you're emitting out, but do people really care?
Nobody cares.
I mean,
nobody cares.
Yeah,
hands are kind of transparent in this country, translucent, see-through.
And this is so we're going through a major change here at the moment with the way that we're doing licensing here in Australia. With our FCC equivalent is taking it over, and one of the things that they specified was the maximum amount of power that you can, or that's high risk and low risk with the height of your antenna. And it says that if the height of your antenna is about 10 meters above the ground and you're running 100 watts or something like that, I'd have to look it up again, that you would be in the low risk category. And I'm like, I wish that they would tell councils and planning officers that, because we have here, I can put up an antenna. The highest I can put up the antenna is 6 meters above the height of the highest point that it attaches to a building, or if it's to the ground, it can only be 6 meters high. So if I put an antenna ground mounted, it can only be 6 meters high without requiring some sort of building permit or some sort of structure permit. Someone should tell them to look at the advantages of getting antennas up high, because the higher the antenna is, I think that they look at it as the higher the antenna is, the more visually intrusive it's going to be. But the higher the antenna is, the safer it is, the better it works for the amateur, and it's actually better for the neighbours around because they don't see it. It's up high in the air. They're not going to see the antenna.
You have to actually look up, and most people are too busy looking down at their phones.
So I have an interesting story that was told to me by someone that used to live here. They had a large, I think it was 60-foot tower in their yard, and it's been there for years. And one weekend, they decided to fold it, because it was a fold-over tower. They decided to tilt it over to paint it. So they went and painted it, and then he put it back up again. It was only down for a couple of days. Next thing you know, he gets a phone call or a knock on the door from the council inspector. And the council inspector comes around and says, we hear that an illegal tower has been erected in the last few days. And he's like, no. And obviously this thing had been approved years and years and years ago. And it's funny how when and the council inspector come around and he looked, and initially he didn't even see where it was. He had to actually, the ham had to point out where the tower was and the antenna. And he said, how long's that been there? And he said, about 20 years. And it's funny how people don't notice things once they're there and they're up in the air. They just completely ignore them. They don't even know that they're there. But once it disappears or something changes, that's when someone notices it. And then it becomes a problem when it comes back, because, that was never there. Of course it was.
I don't know. I mean, I see towers everywhere, but that's only because I'm looking for them.
What's the, is it based per state, county? What is it over there? Is it just, it depends on your antennas, what you can put up and your height and all that sort of thing?
It depends a lot on a lot of very localized things. The general rule of thumb where I was in Wisconsin was your antenna tower has to be able to fall within the footprint of your own property. And if it falls outside, then you need to get permits and zoning and planning and all kinds of other stuff. And then my ham club is actually in the middle of the town, right? They call it the village. So it's like, where the local sheriff's station is and where the library is and where the grocery store and the gas station and all that stuff is. And we kind of put up a tower that would fall outside the footprint of the property and nobody's complained. So,
well, I guess that makes sense. If it doesn't fall outside of your property, then it's not risking any damage to anyone else, is it?
Right.
Don says, not sure height is safe. I would like to know your thoughts on why. Michael, even with a permit in VK, 15 meters is the maximum mast height. That's why the Nally Tower was designed to be 14.7. Yeah, it's really annoying. Obviously, if you live out away from this and it's all about whether someone complains about it. If you put up your antenna out in the middle of nowhere, you can put it up as high as you want within reason, because you can't. Aircraft might see it as a bit of a problem, but yeah, you can get away with it there. So this is what I would like to see. So ham radio hobby Patrick, I think, says here in the US, there has to be reasonable accommodations to allow hams to construct a tower. So I think there's something like this, but it's like at a very local council level, and it varies depending on state to state here. So I'd like something to be consistent, something that's consistent. We want consistency. A mate of mine is not allowed to wind his tower up because of one neighbour. If the tower was up at full height, the neighbour would only see the middle of the tower, not the antennas. Yeah. So where I used to have a tower, when I used to own a house, I used to have a tower, and I put it up, and it was freestanding. It wasn't guyed because it didn't need to be. It wasn't very high. I think it was 10 meters from the ground to the top. And I kind of skirted the line a little bit because I knew most of my neighbours and I knew that they didn't have a problem with it. So I just put it up. And it was there for a little while. And all I had was I just had a single diamond vertical out the top for 2 meters and 70 centimeters. And I think I had a small Yagi on the front, very small Yagi at the time. And what happened is one of the neighbours across the street complained about it. Now, to sort of set the picture here, this neighbour had, on all of the titles in our neighbourhood, you weren't allowed to build a second story on your house, because if you built a second story on your house, you would visually intrude on the landscape and you wouldn't be able to see, over your neighbour's house, right? So what this guy did was he built up the foundations of his house so that the floor of his first story was at the same height as his fence line. So he was still higher than everyone else. So it was quite funny that he decided to complain about my tower. My tower was facing towards the south. There was absolutely no view for him in that direction. All the view was towards the north, but he still decided to complain. The funny thing is the council inspector come round, he looked at it and he said, how high is it from the bottom to the top? And I said, it's 10 metres. And he says, is it attached to your shed, which is right next to it, which is where my shack was? And I said, no, it's not attached. And he says, if you attach it, what's the height from the roof to the top? And I said, it's about 4 or 5 metres. He says, okay, good. He says, do that. And I said, how do you want me to attach it? He says, I don't care. Just make it look substantial. And this is the council guy, which is really good. And so what I did was I went and did that. So it was all within the regulations. However, I read the regulations and the regulations did not specify what kind of antennas you can have on the top. It only specified the height of the antennas and the height of the structure. So I went and built a large 6 meter Yagi, I built a big 2 meter Yagi, and I built another
Nice.
big 70 centimeter Yagi, and I piled them up on top of the tower. And I thought, good, you've got more antennas that you need to look at now because you decided to complain, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yep.
So that's that story, that thereabouts the full height of the tower and the antennas just reminded me about it, because there's no regulations that say you can only put up a 5-element Yagi. I could put up a 20 meter or a 20 meter beam or something like that. It doesn't matter. So
It's crazy when people start, professing laws and then you start going around them. Like, over here we have HOAs, and HOAs have a lot of antenna restrictions. But one of the restrictions that they had was you can't have a boat on a trailer in your driveway. So what my uncle did was park the boat and the trailer on the road in front of his house. And because that was actually not HOA property, it wasn't part of the homeowners association, it was a local county road, they couldn't say anything about it. So they lost, and he still got to keep his boat.
So Don's talking here about antennas and towers being high and not being safe because you can have either something fall on you or you can fall off something. Happens all the time. So two things with this. The first thing is I was talking more about RF safety. So the higher your antenna, then as far as an RF safety perspective, that's going to be better than if it was lower down. And it will perform generally a lot better. But if you're putting your antenna up, you shouldn't have something fall on you if you do it right and you do it correctly, and you use the right hardware and equipment. You can definitely fall off again if you don't use the right hardware, you don't use the right equipment. Fall arresters, I don't know if do you call them cherry pickers? We call them cherry pickers.
Yeah, cherry pickers.
Scissor lift, yep. Not a scissor lift, something's different. But using something like that to eliminate the risks involved. We have a thing here that we have to do called working at heights, which is if you're trying to be, if you're working at a height where there's a fall risk, you need to go through all of the different safety methods of reducing the amount of risk. But But yeah, definitely if done right, then it's okay. But definitely take that into consideration when you're putting up your antenna a lot higher. So I asked the council guy, how should I attach it to the garage? And I said, because there was no defined way of attachment. And I said, can I use 2 cable ties or zip ties? And he says, that doesn't really look structural. So I just used a piece of a steel tube across from the tower with a U-bolt bracket onto the tower and then across to the roof. And it wasn't even really attached to the roof, to be quite honest. It was attached with a couple of screws just so it looked like it was attached.
This is another good question, and you just did a video on this. A fellow ham radio operator made a great dipole antenna placed on the balcony, but their balfang goes deaf. Would an FT65 have better filtering? Is there a way to improve the front end?
So I'm guessing the dipole antenna is like for 2 meters, 70 centimeters attached to the balfang. So I guess it depends on how close they are to any more RF sources. If they're in a city, it's very likely that they're close to a lot of different transmitters that would be wiping out the front end of their balfang, which, I did the video on a broadcast location where there's lots of different transmitters. Not everyone's going to live that close to broadcast transmitters. But if their balfang's going deaf when they connect to the dipole antenna, then that's most likely their front end's being completely overloaded. Would an FT65 have better filtering? I'd probably almost guarantee that it would have better.
I would certainly hope so, yeah.
Yeah. So the thing is that the balfang radios are made for 136, say on 2 meters, they're made for 136 to 174 megahertz. That's like a 40 megahertz range, right? On UHF, I think it's like 400 to 480 or something like that. So that's an 80 megahertz range. Yaesu radios, though, they're specifically ham radios. So the Yaesu FT65 would be designed to operate between 144 and 148. Not down at 137 or not up at 174. So that means that when they build the radio, they can better tune the filtering in the radio to only cover that small frequency range. So it's only going to pass frequencies well between 144 and 148. So just to keep that in mind. The other thing is too is when people, is it Mars modding? Mars modding.
Yeah, that's what we call it over here.
Yeah, so sometimes if you modify your radio for Mars mod or something like that, you might not get as much output power out of it, and that's because the filtering is designed for ham radio frequencies, not for other frequencies. So yes, the Yaesu should work better. So I did, and in that video that I did, the best radio that came out with the best filtering was the Kenwood THD 72. This was the best radio that I had out of all of those. That included the Yaesu and the Woxons and the Baofangs and everything. The Kenwood was the best. And I found that Kenwood has the best receiver of a handheld radio that I've got. It just, nothing seems to interfere with it. I took it all over America and I was all over the place, and it just performed so well.
Awesome. You got a super chat from David Wilson.
Oh, I'm fighting for you to put it up. Thank you, David, for the $3 Aussie dollars. Appreciate that. I need to get the soundboard back.
Get to work, Hayden. Do work, son.
I need to definitely get the soundboard back.
And then Jody had gifted 5 memberships. There you go. And one of them went to Bryant Wally. The other one went to Tim B. And then another one went to, I'm going to mispronounce this, Sandra Risen. And then Tracy Kennedy. And then John Hummel Newell. So those are your 5 new members there.
Thank you, Jody.
Thank you very much, Jody.
And welcome to everyone who's now become a member. The background music's just not the same, is it?
No.
Safety tip for Don: a gin pole is not a drink you get to consume on your tower.
Right.
So
Before we go too much farther, membership.
Yes.
There is a members only area on the Toads Discord. So send Hayden a direct message or at him on the Discord, and he'll get you added to the members only area. And then Hayden does a lot of members only YouTube community posts. He's actually very active with his membership base that way.
Yes, and I actually need to do a. What are we? We're in January already. I need to do a January update because there is a lot happening on the channel. So we'll do that. So yes, and the Toads Discord. Yes, we can add you to that. You were going to say something?
No, people were just talking about weather. I had to check the temperature. It's 71 Fahrenheit inside the trailer with the windows open. It's fantastic.
So a gin pole. What is a gin pole?
It is a pole that hangs off the side of the tower that lets you raise and lower things up to the top of the tower, and you can actually use the gin pole to build the tower. From what I understand, I know what they are. I've never seen them in use though. It's like a crane.
Yeah, to get your antenna above the height of that tower safely, without you having to stand out the top. Because even if you do stand out the top, you still probably won't be able to get the antenna pole in.
So they're asking if I went to the VLA. I did not go to the VLA because I was only in town for the weekend and then had to move. There was a lot of stuff that needed to be done. The gin pole is a lever. That's correct.
What's his name? Adam. Adam says the Anytone 878 does surprisingly well resisting descents in a high RF environment. That's a DMR radio too, I think.
I believe so.
If you're going to look at the Kenwood, you won't. Good luck finding one. They're very rare. They're hard to find, and if you do find them used, then
they're expensive.
They are very expensive. There is the new THD 75 coming out, which is also expensive. No idea how good that is though compared to this one yet. So, Rob says the filtering on Chinese dual bands is aimed at the 70 centimeter band, which is why they're so crap on 2 meters. We have done a few reviews on those radios before and have found the same conclusion on a lot of them. The Quancheng, though, surprisingly does pretty well. That's probably one of the best of the... does one of the best. Don, I do a lot of polls. I do a lot of polls and a lot of quizzes, and there's a lot of people that do the quizzes and they say, what if I won now? You don't win anything in a quiz. You just get the satisfaction of knowing that you are either right or
bragging
wrong.
Bragging rights, yeah. So David's saying he's having trouble with the Discord invitation. When you picked the invitation, did you set it to not expire, or is you using an expired invitation, son?
Yeah, so if you check the link in this video description, there will be the Toads link, which I will find here. And that is one that should not expire. That should be the good one. Let me just let me load it up on a different browser and just double check. Yep, it's not expired. It's saying I can join. So
okay,
that should get you into Toads, and then there's a separate members only invitation, and that has to be done manually. Discord's a bit funny like that, isn't it? With private channels.
Yes.
45 Eldo, will I get my soundboard back on before Jason constructs his DX Commander? Most definitely. He is not building that anytime soon. Holy moly. THD 75s, 1K here in Canuckland, so probably will be the same in Australia. I don't know how much the price is here, but it's probably going to be ridiculous. You're going to have to be pretty... And then the thing is it doesn't even do some things that the older models do. So, I don't know.
Yeah, like it's not full duplex is what they're saying.
Mm.
But it's supposed to have better APRS built into it.
Yeah, Mike's definitely going to be buying that then. The D75 has full duplex as well, but you kind of have to make sure that you have a headset or a speaker mic, headset or headphones plugged into it, because otherwise when you transmit full duplex, the speaker hears the microphone and you get feedback on full duplex. And with the Kenwood K connector, The speaker is the 2.5 millimeter plug. So for normal headphones, which have 3.5 millimeters, you need an adapter. So there's a couple of little caveats, but it works okay. Full duplex is handy, especially as I found out for satellites, because you can listen to yourself through the satellite and how well you are actually getting in. I'm a Icon fanboy, but I love my TS480 sat in the car. I really wish that, and I'm the same with Chris, I really wish that Kenwood never pulled out of Australia. And we questioned what was his name? Old mate at Dayton, Don, W3 GPS, W6 GPS, W something.
The Kenwood
GPS,
guy.
The Kenwood guy. And he didn't really have the answers, but I didn't expect him to have the answers because that's Kenwood USA, not Kenwood Australia. So
Right.
yeah. So anything more on antennas? We had the polls that.
Yes, lots more on antennas. What would you like to talk about, Hayden?
Squirrel.
You want to go for another 6 hours?
You could talk forever on antennas. I need to. I'm making a video today, and I'm hoping that the weather improves, which it is. The sun has come out now, so it's going to be an outdoor video.
James has a good question. What HF bands have you had the most luck to contact the USA from Australia?
That's an interesting question. The most luck, probably the most consistent would be 20 meters, I think. 20 meters, because that's regardless of what the sun's doing, 20 meters is usually pretty good. And then the next, I operate mainly on 10. 10 meters has been somewhat successful. FT8 is real easy pretty much on any HF band that you look at, depending on the time of day. 40 meters is also usually pretty good at night time when both sides of the path are night in darkness. So
the grey line.
But unfortunately, that means that it's going to be early. Either it's going to be late evening here when it's dark, and it's going to be really early morning over in the US. But you do hear on 40 meters when that happens, you hear some of the night owls coming up on 40 meters. But I would say 20 meters, yeah.
Yep. So a big tip is time of day, like Hayden was saying, at the gray line. And the other tip is make sure that you are within the opposite country's band plan, because the band plans don't overlap for the same bands. Like all of 20 meters isn't accessible in one country versus the other country, or it's all of 40 meters or something like that. But look it up. Look up the band plan you want to talk to, and then talk to the people that are in that license class, in that band plan that you can contact.
And not all hams in VK can operate on 20 meters either. So Foundation can't operate on 20 meters. Standards can operate on 20 meters. But, yeah, all hams can operate on 40 meters. And, yeah, as Adam says, 40 meters during the US early morning. 15 and 10, 15 and 10 meters is usually pretty good, especially when both sides of the path are daylight. So when it's day in the US and day here. So usually that's sort of early morning here, early morning to lunchtime here in Australia, and sort of late afternoon, evening for the US. So, yeah.
So Adam's saying it's not gray line; it's just the specific time of day.
Yeah. So if I zoom out here and I go to, let's have a look on PSK Reporter. So, just looking at that, I would say, well, actually, I'm looking at 6 meters at the moment, but let's go to 10. So this is from Australia. So you could see here that there's hardly anything going over to Europe here. All of the signals are in the daylight paths, almost. There's a couple here that are in darkness over in the top end of South America and sort of East Coast USA, but almost all of the contacts are all in the daylight path here on 10 meters because of, as Adam says, where the sun is. The sun's probably, in the middle here somewhere, heading across.
Yeah, you're in the middle and you're hitting gray line on both sides almost.
Yeah, so if I go, now we go 15 meters. 15 meters will be fairly similar as well with a couple of exceptions. See, there's a couple of exceptions here. 20 meters should just be hopefully all over the place, which it is. There you go. You've got to Europe, you've got to Japan, you've got to the US. So that's why I was saying 20 meters just day or night usually just is open to somewhere.
Yeah. And the station you're trying to work, they have to be awake. They have to have a radio on. They have to be operating on the band and mode and frequency that you're interested in. All kinds of stuff like that comes into play. So, I mean, like, don't try to talk to Hayden in the middle of the night when he's asleep. You might have to get up in the middle of the night to talk to him in the middle of his day.
40 meters is kind of a bit limited here. You can see that's VK6 in Perth. It's still like 7 a.m. in the morning, so they're still getting a couple of contacts here into Europe in darkness across this darkness path. So that kind of, I hope, gives a bit of a visualization there. But I'm watching 6 meters, and I saw that there was a couple of spots here to the Canary Islands, which is interesting.
That's a weird way to take that path. How does it know to take that path?
Well, is that short path or is that long path? Is it going this way? Which I think it's going this way because majority of this path, 6 meters usually works over the daylight path as well, because the sun is charging the ionosphere here as it goes along, or the F layer. But it's a weird path that it's drawn there on the. I think it's going this way. But is that actually a spot? Is that getting to 2 separate stations? Because sometimes you'll get. It is too. So that is a legitimate spot because sometimes you'll get one station will be hearing like all these random stations that they're reporting, but they're on the wrong band. But these guys, there's two separate lines. So maybe I need to maybe we
get on
need
6
to
meters.
Start, well, I am on 6 meters at the moment, but I don't have FT8 running. I should do that. So I might hear the Canary Islands. Interesting. So yeah,
and with that, the stream ends and Hayden gets on 6 meters.
Well, Collins just asked. He got here late with the question. What's the question with radio antenna?
It's something to talk about. There's never a question. The question was, what was better, a radio or an antenna?
And an antenna's won out 85% to 15% in the poll. So take what you will with that. So.
What would you rather spend your money on, a radio or an antenna was the question, to be specific. Yeah. And everybody wants to spend more money on the antenna than they do on the radio, which I can agree with.
Yeah. Someone said earlier in the chat that if you've got the nice flashy radio, it's much better than the antenna, but yeah.
Well, I mean, you don't really look at the antenna much.
Yeah. Bryant, it is 10:08 a.m. here at the moment. Cool. Just going through. Adam's also got a great video on using VOACAP for predicting this kind of stuff too.
VOACAP.
So I don't know a lot about it, but Adam's done a video on it, which is very good. Hey, Rob. Rob's in the house. Michael. Why is it so hard to go west from Western Australia to South Africa? Why is it so hard to just go west? I hardly hear South Africa at all. Is there no hams there? I don't know. Or maybe it's just from here. On every band. I never hear anyone from South Africa. I don't even know how many hams are in South Africa, or just in the African continent. It's just hard to get any contacts there. I don't know what it's like from the US. Do you have the same problem?
I don't think I've made any South Africa contacts, but I have made Australia and New Zealand contacts.
But have you made Africa at all, like the continent?
No, I think I've gotten into the Azores. Isn't the Azores just outside the northwest corner of Africa? If I'm remembering correctly.
the last contact I made with Africa that I can remember was to a South African station on 10 meters, and it lasted for about 4 hours. And that was at the last solar cycle peak. So, but I haven't heard anyone, and that was on SSB. So, Hamstick Eric, 6 meters is weird. I've only ever heard Europe from Hawaii via long path over VK. Was trying to work VK when EU came blasting in. Yeah, so I've got a couple of issues where I can't beam towards South America because that is due south and there's a hill in the way and houses in the way. But I could beam due north and maybe I could work them long path, maybe. It is funny. It is very funny like that. Adam's going to spend money on the radio and build the antenna unless he's spending money on beer cans and then building the antenna out of beer cans, in which case you would be spending money on the antenna.
Right.
And Adam's posted the links to that Valcap video. Thanks for doing that too. The other we've done videos before on checking real-time solar conditions at the moment, and solar conditions are looking very good. Like Solar Ham here shows that the solar flux index, the higher this number and the higher this number, 188 and 191, SSN and SFI, if they're high, you know that you're going to be on the right track. And then look at this chart. If this is all green and low below 2, then you know that you've got good HF propagation conditions, which we do at the moment. So that's pretty much all. That's the easiest way to look at it. There's lots of different variables, but if those look good, then you might the propagation will be good.
My internet connection blipped out if you asked me something.
No, I didn't ask you anything.
Good. Safe.
Nothing more than usual anyway.
Right. Nope, no idea. No clue what you're talking
James,
about.
not even FT8. I mean, I've seen South Africa on FT8 because it comes up in pink because I haven't worked them, and then I try to work them and they just don't hear me. So I don't know. And Hamstick Arrow, I was able to work EU on 6 meters SSB with 100 watts and a 3-element Yagi. Yeah, I've got a 5-element Yagi and 100 watts, and I was able to work Mexico on Friday. There was Mexico and Guatemala on Friday. Not so much US, and it kind of made me. I put a post out on. We can't call it Twitter anymore. I put a post out on X, and I was just trying to figure out how many. So these are all of the apparently monitoring stations on FT8, which we can see on PSK Reporter. And I mean, it looks like there's a lot here, but there was like one. There was one signal on the entirety of Friday from it was from Missouri. It was really random. And that was the only signal from the United States down. But all of these, there was like 4 or 5 stations in Mexico and Guatemala which got through. So, and throughout the whole rest of the day, nothing else from the US except for that 1 or 2 from Missouri. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm assuming that everyone's monitoring 6 meters there, and it's not just sort of just leaving the program running or something like that. So, yeah. Anyway, ham radio nonsense, antennas. I think we're probably getting toward the end now.
Yep.
You notice, I think we've peeved off Jim. Jim's. I haven't seen Jim for a while. Is he all right?
It's not hard to do. He's a little sensitive.
Is he?
Yeah.
That's no good. Well, Jim, he is one of our biggest fans, though. But I mean, a lot of people don't know about him.